Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here, especially as we begin our transition from Zoom to Teams. So thank you for bearing with us there. Hello and welcome to our second Cambridge Disaster Research Network seminar of the term. For those of you who haven't joined us before, CDRN is a network for those interested in disasters and natural hazards from departments both across the University of Cambridge and beyond. Our objective is to connect hazard and disaster research and researchers across disciplines and to link academic approaches to the needs and experiences of practitioners. I'm Ellen Kuryava, and I'm a PhD student in the Department of Geography, and I'm one of the conveners for CDRN. This is an exciting term for us because we're in a period of convener transition, and today I'm excited to welcome two of those new conveners to introduce themselves, Joshua Nicholas and Farah Nibs. Joshua, would you like to say hello?
Absolutely. Hello there, everyone. I am a second-year PhD student in the Department of Geography here at the University of Cambridge, and I am very much on the fence between human and physical geography, looking at natural hazards and their influence on society.
Perfect. Thanks, Joshua. And Farah, would you like to unmute and say hello as well? Okay, we might have lost Farah for now. That's okay. We are joined by one outgoing convener as well, Maria Ikonomova. Maria, would you like to introduce yourself quickly?
Yes, hi, I'm Maria. I'm one of the old conveners. I'm a final year PhD student at the engineering department in Cambridge.
Thanks, Maria. We are sad to see Maria and our other outgoing conveners go, and we're super excited to welcome our new ones. We have two additional new conveners who weren't able to make it today, in addition to our ongoing.
Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes, Farah, we can hear you.
Perfect. I'm sorry about that. My mic somehow wasn't working. Hello, everyone. I am Farah Nibs. I am relatively new to the CDRN network. I am a professor at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and a disaster scientist. I focus primarily on islands and the intersection of disasters and critical infrastructure in this setting. And I am excited to learn about this presentation and to learn a little bit more about you guys as time goes by. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Farah. Okay, great. So we're sad to see Maria go and excited to welcome our new conveners. We have two additional conveners who will introduce at a later session, and Ainsley Trahan, also in the Department of Geography at Cambridge, is going to stay on as a CDRN convener as well. But that's enough about our institutional structure. Today, we're excited to hear from Teresa Armijos Burneo. She is a lecturer in environmental sustainability at the University of Edinburgh. She's a social scientist, and she works in interdisciplinary research that critically explores the intersection between the environment and development. Teresa's research applies participatory methods and the creative arts to co-produce knowledge with those most affected by environmental change. She works with Indigenous, rural, and urban communities in Latin America and the Caribbean. And today she'll be speaking to us on participatory and creative methods in disaster risk studies, storytelling to enhance knowledges and possible futures with communities at risk. We are super excited to hear from Teresa. And before I turn things over to her, I just want to mention that we'll run this session as we usually do. Teresa will speak for about 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and then we'll have opportunity for questions and discussion at the end. And we'll do that in the usual sort of raising hand or in the chat kind of way. Okay, Teresa, would you like to go ahead and share your slides?
Great. So, can you see them? Can you see the right? Good.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Good. Let me just organize myself here. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having me here. It's very good to speak to you, and please let's think of this as a conversation. I of course will introduce things, will present some of the work that I've been doing, but really what I want to do today is explain how I got to where I am right now. That is not something that arts-based methods, just one day it occurred to me and I've been doing it always. It's been a slow process and one that I have been doing and learning about with other colleagues, with other people that, that I work with. So I am going to start, okay. Just to position myself a little bit, I know that many of you do research on this topic.
So sorry to interrupt, Teresa. I just wanted to let you know that the Teams is over your slide.
Oh,
yeah, perfect.
yes.
Sorry.
All right, okay. Just give me a second. Thank you for telling me. I'm going to do something. Use a slideshow. Here you go. Can you see it? Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay. So I want to locate myself so that you understand where I'm coming from. The research that I do is impact driven. I'm trying to contribute directly to disaster risk reduction through the research, through the processes that I do. Of course, I'm locating myself in this idea that disasters are not natural, and to try to understand the root causes of risk, what interacts with the hazards to create a disaster, basically. I'm looking at the before, during, and after of the disasters in different projects, in different locations, and really going from this idea of vulnerability to capacities of the communities, and moving a little bit away. Yes, understanding vulnerability, thinking about all vulnerability, but really trying to understand how we can enhance disaster risk through a capacities approach, thinking about what is it that the communities do have and we can enhance to reduce disaster risk. Also thinking about rights and citizenship, responsibility, agency, all these things. And the politics of knowledge. What are the ways of knowing, doing, and being in nature that is what people are interacting with, and what is, what is at the core of what creates risk and disasters, etc. Dialogue between different academic disciplines is at the core of what I do, and that is why I use arts-based methods. I will come to that a little bit later. And very much I'm interested in facilitating a dialogue between scientific and indigenous knowledges. You will see that I bring in theoretical and methodological and ethical challenges together, all through this idea of arts-based methods and the ways in which stories are told. In the last maybe 5 years, I've emphasized my work more and more on decolonial research, on decolonial methods, and trying to incorporate critical theoretical approaches, feminist, decolonial. All of these theories are helping us identify hierarchies of knowledge, race, and gender at the center, seeing them at the center of colonial practices, which of course are part of those root causes of disaster that I was mentioning before. But really, the reason why I'm bringing this in is because it's helping myself, and generally all of us, challenge the research design and aims, asking ourselves how and for whom we are producing this research, and how is risk defined and lived by those who are exposed and have to live with these issues on their daily life. And of course, recognizing multiple and plural forms of knowledge, and again, as I was saying, different spaces of dialogue, which allow us, in terms of theory and understanding, to rethink definitions of risk, of vulnerability and disaster, and ourselves, and the role that we play and that research plays in the transformation and the work we do. So in order to do all of this, I've arrived to this area of work, and where I position myself very much around the use of participatory methodologies and the creative arts to conduct qualitative research with communities at risk. I do this from a perspective of engaged research, meaning what I mean when I say on demand is that research that is of use and of interest to the people that I'm working with. And the methods are trying to allow for co-production of knowledge and of data, and are methods that elicit conversation and bring out conversation that hopefully we can have more of later today. And art is a method for, I believe, for transformation. It is also allows the research to be ethical and to open spaces for those changes to take place, which I will explain with some examples very soon. art as a result of an expression of a research process. So here we're not looking for a particular artistic product that is beautiful. Yes, they end up all being beautiful, I can assure you, but really what I'm interested in is the process, what happens during the process and the narratives and the learning that takes place as we go through. I want to bring to your attention the picture here on this slide, which is, for example, a dance that was performed by a group of Embera indigenous women in Colombia as part of a long process of research that we did with them, where they were telling their story of multiple experiences of multiple forms of risk in terms of the armed conflict in Colombia, but also in terms of the living in areas at risk of disaster. And they told their stories to the local authorities through this dance. Okay, so this is just an example of how the research is connected also to impact and to policy. But also I want to explain what is this picture doing there. It's been one of the most special moments in my work, and so it's important to tell you what it is. So what are the examples that I'm going to draw from? I've been very lucky and fortunate to work in very many different projects across Latin America and the Caribbean. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Shell project, also about moving with risk, and also about, I think, the project in Montserrat and in St. Vincent. But the point is that in all this diversity, we need to adapt the methodologies. We need to adapt the way in which we work. There's not one recipe, and this is very important. That's one of the points that I would like to highlight today. There's not one way of doing this. You need to feel it. You need to listen to what people want. You need to understand what is it that is appropriate for that place in particular. So going back to this idea of the journey, I wanted to show you this picture because this really is the first time when art became the mediator and the facilitator in a workshop, in a process that we were having in Ecuador around Volcán Tungurahua. And it was a moment of, like, probably many of you have felt it, when important things happen in your research, important things happen in your work, that they make you feel something different is going on, something new is happening. And this was that moment for me. What we did here, and the picture is it's bringing together scientists from Ecuador and also from the UK that we were working on the Striva project. We were also working with local communities and people, the Vigías of the Volcán Tungurahua, basically a network of community-based monitoring early warning system, let's say, in this volcano, to talk to each other. But that had been done before. We had facilitated workshops, but in this occasion, I invited an artist that I knew in Ecuador, where I am from, by the way, if those of you are wondering where I'm from, I am from Ecuador. So I had invited these artists to facilitate a process. And what he did, he asked a very simple question. He asked, what is your relationship to the volcano? How have you related to the volcano? And people just started saying, oh, the volcano has made me think about the science. The volcano has made me think about my livelihoods. The volcano has made me think what matters to me. Somebody else said, the volcano has made me think about myself and how I feel in many different ways. In any case, what this artist was doing was drawing all these different things that people were saying, and that is in the background. If you can see the drawings in the back, in black and white, that is what he was doing, just documenting what people were saying. Probably you've seen this in conferences, people in the background doing it. This was not in the background, this was in the front of the room. We were having a discussion as he was drawing. And this became very interesting because we were able to explore the value of people's experiences, to share knowledges in different ways. The scientists began talking about emotions. So it was also, I mean, now I see it in a different way, but in that moment I didn't understand really what was going on, but I really liked it. This was a moment that changed the way that I began to use, arts-based methods. Here is some examples of what we did next. We then, based on all of those discussions, the artist also facilitated some murals, painting. And here you can see some details of the murals, people evacuating, unfortunately, animals that are died, the military telling people to leave, things that really matter to people. And this brings me to the point that I was making earlier around people's experiences. You don't need many words to really feel. Like, just think for a minute, what does the first drawing makes you feel? Like the woman with the children running, it's saying a lot. It's saying things that we don't necessarily need to convey in words. It's already telling us a lot, okay? So these are all thoughts that I had as we went through in this process in Ecuador. And then I was fortunate enough to be part of another project where we really began to say, why don't we put art at the center of the work? Why don't we use art as a methodology and arts-based methods as a methodology? This was the project Moving with Risk in Colombia that basically looked at, we were working with people who had been displaced by the conflict and resettled in areas at risk of disasters, but also with the institutions that are supposed to support them. This is also the example, this is the project that I was mentioning earlier with the picture of the woman dancing, okay? We wanted to understand their trajectories of risk. And again, we were trying to see how we could move from this idea of vulnerability to capacities through listening to the voices of the communities at risk and the way they wanted to tell their stories to the authorities, but to us as researchers in that endeavor of understanding their trajectories of risk. What we did is we used music to mediate or elicit conversations. And as an example, I'm gonna give you, I'm gonna tell you a little bit more of what we did in terms of music. Instead of going and speaking to people and asking them to go through their life histories, we invited people to share with us a song that had an important meaning for them and to share with us why that was the case. And think about what that makes you feel if I were to ask each one of you of a song that has an important meaning for you. It immediately brings memories, it brings feelings. How does your body feel when I say this? I mean, I feel it in my stomach. I mean, thinking about songs that matter to me. Why? Because it immediately brings memories. So through that method, we were able, through the music, which we listened with the people, each one of those songs in those meetings that we had, in those conversations, we were able to really get deep into people's stories, people's histories, people's trajectories of risk. After those were individual conversations, we then moved on to telling those stories collectively, inviting communities and groups to tell their stories collectively through the use of theater. And in some cases, they chose theater. This is the picture of one of those communities where we were also able to incorporate people with disabilities, as you can see in the picture. And in another place with the dance, as I already showed you the other picture, and somewhere else people chose the mural. We had those two ways of conveying, of sharing, but the important point here is that these stories were told to the local and national authorities that are working on disaster risk reduction in Colombia. We were changing, and this is important and maybe at the core of the work that I do, changing the conditions of the dialogue between communities at risk or who have experienced disasters and the national and local authorities. Changing the idea of people as victims to people as capable of, for example, doing a play, telling their story, telling their own story through plays, through dance, etc. This this was very powerful. It created a really interesting response from the local authorities, from the national authorities, with some interesting follow-up things. I'm going to tell you a little bit more. Here, there are some more pictures from that process, some of the workshops where we, again, use body mapping, this other one where we followed up those music conversations with drawings to go deeper into the understanding of what resources helped or not people, and finally one of the other plays that was done in Bogota. So what is it that happened? What happened to the people? What happened to us? These are some of the ways in which we were understanding the impact that this project had. We were able to build trust and collaboration between neighborhoods, communities, and institutions, increased confidence and self-esteem. People felt different after going through these processes. And this is not something I am saying, but they keep telling us that to this day. The project allowed me to recognize my capacities and talents, and people keep bringing this up over and over again in different projects that I've been involved in. It raised the status of local knowledge in front of the national authorities, the disaster, like the National Unit for Disaster Risk Management, but also transformed the perceptions and understandings of. Here it says, from a civil servant, it says, now we have a different perception and it is not going to be difficult to be able to work together and carry on the activities that we have with these people. But perhaps one of the most memorable phrases from that day was that a woman said, I can now see you as people and not as numbers. And I apologize for having done that before. And again, that is another moment that for me was like, okay, now I know what I do, the work I do, and this is what I want to do. I want to continue putting more effort into this. So this was moving with risk. Then bringing things together, all these experiences and the fact that we have met people in different places, and like in this meeting, all of a sudden you meet somebody that says, oh, Teresa, maybe I want to work with you, whatever. I was also able to get some funding to bring together survivors of a volcanic eruption in Ecuador, Tungurahua volcano, in Colombia, in Nevado del Ruiz, where I had been working before, and also to invite them to go to Guatemala, where this was in June 2019. We were able to travel to Guatemala and have a facilitated discussion with the same artists from Ecuador who also flew there, where we were able to have a conversation around what it means to recover, not from the point of view of us, the researchers, but from other survivors. And again, we mediated that conversation through art. Roberto, who's one of the Guatemalans, then said this phrase that I have put here, and I would like to just highlight what is highlighted, that the university arrived, we met and listened to them. It was like a rain cloud in the middle of a desert. So this is a year after the eruption of Volcán de Fuego in Guatemala. They listened to us and we listened and understood and learned from those who had already lived it before. They warmed our hearts and opened windows where a very strong light entered and gave us encouragement to recover, how we were feeling. What happened at that moment is that we understood even more the importance of being careful around these methods, how powerful they can be, how emotional they can be, especially with people who have gone through a lot of traumatic experiences. It was a very difficult situation to handle. We were working with psychologists as well. So let me also highlight that all these things I work with bigger teams, always with very strong support in terms of the ethics and the psychological implications that some of this work has. To continue with the story, what happened is that COVID happened after this, and we couldn't follow up in person because the plan of that project was to do an exhibit in Guatemala where all these points of views and pictures and videos of the process were going to be displayed. But we had to move to an online situation and conversation, which we also, and this is where the creativity of my colleagues, the facilitators and artists that I work with in different places comes into play. we also mediated with art, okay? So each one of us, and that includes myself as a researcher and colleagues in, and the volcanic survivors in Guatemala, in Ecuador, and in Colombia, we all received a bag. And I'm gonna show you like what I mean by a bag. One of these tote bags, like, the bags that you do shopping, full of art materials, okay? And like now, like we're in front of our screens, we would share the things that we were doing together, that we were doing on our own. We would share in sessions that were facilitated online. At the end of that process, we wrote together the book, a short story book that you can see a picture on your screen, but also it's online, and I'll show you here. These are also pictures from that book, and this is the webpage where you can go and see some of the results from that project, which is the book and a quilt that basically brings together the pieces that each one of us was making in our homes in the UK, in Ecuador, in Guatemala, and in Colombia. They finally flew together, and they are now a quilt that if any of you were at the Cities on Volcano conference in Guatemala, we showed it there this February. But anyway, it's circulating. Hopefully one day it comes to the UK and I can show it to all of you. Where am I now? Where have all these experiences taken me now? We're about to finish the Shell project in Guatemala, where we're bringing in more of these, but also starting to be more critical, bringing in more of the decolonial, bringing in other theories that also complement these arts-based methods that I was talking about. I'm thinking more in terms of the theory of the sentipensar, which is the field thinking with place and territory, and to really try to understand people's relationship to place. What we're doing, and these are some pictures here that I can show, like colleagues that maybe there are some scientists that I work with, Jeremy Phillips from Bristol and Eliza Calder from the University of Edinburgh. We're having dialogues where we are thinking through questions that people themselves had about their territories, places that had been affected by disasters. In this case, the hurricane Stan that impacted in 2005 and killed more than 300 people and wiped out an entire town. So we're working with the survivors. And rather than thinking in terms of the places that are safe or unsafe, we wanted to change that narrative a little bit and think of the places where people live, the places that people feel in their everyday, but also how they dream of their homes in the future. And we invited them to think of questions that they would like to ask those territories, but also the members of the team. And here the pictures are of us, the team members, telling stories and responding to the questions that the local organizations that we were working with had about those territories. I don't know if you see on the right-hand side, there's an image. We flew a drone and then showed the images to people. And this really opened a very interesting conversation around how we see our territories from above, as if we were birds. And this really changed the way that some of the locals were looking at things, but also for us as researchers to understand what different things mean to people and what matters to them in those territories. In any case, all of these exercises in many ways have been mediated by arts-based methods, okay? And I'm gonna show you here just two examples of, more pictures of the work that we're doing there. In Panabaj, in Santiago Titlan, the pictures that I showed you just now are from there. We're working with 6 organizations, and in Volcán de Fuego with women leaders in the communities around the volcano. This mural is the result of the research process. A research process that I was leading it, but I was not doing the interviews myself or going around and asking questions. We invited, as I said before, the local people to go around to ask the elders in the village, to ask us, to ask others, to find out between themselves what they want to say about the history of their homes and to tell their story using the medium that they chose. And in this case, you're seeing a mural that tells the story and the result of the research process that we co-produce with the indigenous women organization in this place in Panabaj. I can go on about it, but as you can see there's an image of the village, then of the armed conflict, and later on of the landslide. And again, at the end, there's a woman weaving, seeing, imagining the future. And that's where we are right now with the project. I want to finish, I'm gonna soon finish the presentation by also presenting reflect a little bit of why participatory as methods, but why not, okay? And I want to be extremely careful about telling a happy story about this, that it's all great, that is all very, important. Yes, it is. The advantages are, for instance, it equalizes the different types of knowledges. It recognizes the role of the researcher. It embeds us in there, like the feminist theories that I was telling you about are inviting us to do. We can think in terms of reflexivity, positionality. Again, it allows us to think about emotion, to bring it to the center of the conversation, to think of emotion as a source of knowledge as well, to do engaged research, to make it more ethical, more caring of the people. People are talking about disasters, people are talking about trauma. Art allows to do that in a caring way, in a soft and gentle way that I'm more and more convinced that it's, at least for me and for the work that I do and the questions that I like to ask, it's a good medium to do it. It's ethical and good way to do it, okay? But also it has disadvantages. And here I'm just going to mention a few. The methodology is extremely time consuming and difficult to replicate. It's not that what worked in one community works in another one. I recently published a paper where we talk about the things that did not work with the indigenous women in Colombia, for example, and to recognize that not always things work and that we also make mistakes, okay? It is also time consuming in terms of, for some of you that are early career researchers, do you have the time to invest in doing this well? And also writing your PhD dissertation and also doing all the things that you need to do. This is extreme, I don't know how to put it. This takes a lot of time, but also a lot of emotional time. It is not easy. It hurts at times. Sometimes, for example, in Guatemala, where I'm working at the moment, I've been doing work there for 3 years with a big, really nice team. At the beginning, people were always asking, so what do we get? What are we going to get from this process? You know, the communities are always asking this. I'm sure many of you have experienced that. So what do we get from this? And the answer is we're going to go through a process. You're going to see this is, and if you don't want to be part of this, it's okay. This is an invitation. We're all learning. You're our co-researchers, all of these things. People understand and engage. And even to this day, let's say I was there in June, I again had that question. What am I going to get back? What am I going to get from this process? So it is a back and forth, and you need to be very sure and believe that this is what you're doing. So it's just a cautionary, let's say, word that it is time consuming, but emotionally very difficult as well. You can't and you will not generate numbers. You're going to generate stories. You're going to open spaces for dialogue. You're going to change the conditions of the dialogue. And so also in terms of the objectives that you have for research or for your any work that you're doing in terms of disaster risk also needs to be thought in terms of what kind of knowledge we're co-producing. It won't be necessarily numbers. And of course, the ethical implications that I've already mentioned throughout, that there are moments when people need to be contained, that there will be crying, there will be upset, there will be difficult things because people are telling their stories. And so we should be careful with that. Not only with the participants, but here I also note the researchers. I think we need to come to terms as researchers in disaster risk that we are not separated from the stories of the people that we work with, that these stories and this type of research impacts us at a personal level. We don't like to talk about this, but I think it's important that we do. And so whenever I have an opportunity like today, I am saying this to the group, that we need to look after ourselves a little bit more. And as a community of people working in this type of research, we need to be more open about it. So again, this type of research also brings out a lot of our emotions. In this case, my emotions as Teresa. What has happened to me over these past 10 years that I've been doing this research? Many things have happened, and that is why I'm telling you, and I'm asking all of us to look after ourselves a little bit more. So in conclusion, these type of methods helps us share stories from people who have experienced hazards and disasters. Using art helps break with conventional ways of learning and producing knowledge. Art is a bridge between the researchers and the communities and between different forms of knowledge. It brings humanity to the center of our work. We begin to see ourselves not as a researcher, not necessarily as a community member, but we're both human beings. It brings emotion, empathy, and affect. People decide how and what they want to share in terms of their stories, what they want to remember, and what they want to not forget, but again, where the silence is also needed. It also helps in terms of recovery, helps in terms of thinking about transforming perceptions of what people know or don't know, and really highlighting people's capacities. And it helps with this reflexive and transformative research process in terms of the teams, but also for the people that take part in the research. And with that, I'm going to finish so that we can have, hopefully, a conversation around this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Teresa. That was just fascinating. And I'm looking forward to our discussion. Who would like to start us off with a question?